This is a heartbreaking story about a mother's love and the quiet pain of being forgotten. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell for more powerful, emotional stories that stay with you. My dear, your feedback means so much to me. Please let me know where you're watching from and whether you enjoyed this story. It's truly, truly important to me. Thank you so much. My name is Eleanor, and today I am 75 years old. The silence is the first thing you notice when you wake up on your milestone birthday in an empty house. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a heavy, weighted silence, thick with the ghosts of laughter that should be here, with the echoes of phone calls that won't come. There's a small, single-serving cupcake with a lone candle on my kitchen counter. I bought it for myself yesterday at the grocery store. This is my celebration, a party for one, because my children, my son David and my daughter Lena, have forgotten I exist. You're probably thinking I must have been a terrible mother to deserve this. That's what I've been asking myself for the past 2 years. Sifting through the ashes of my memories, trying to find the one crucial mistake that led me to this quiet, profound loneliness. I gave them everything. My time, my love, my money, my dreams. And maybe that was the mistake. But if you knew the last conversation I had with my daughter, the one selfish boundary I finally tried to draw, you'd understand that sometimes a child's love has a price. And I had finally, after a lifetime, run out of money to pay it. This house used to be filled with noise, the joyful chaos of 2 children growing up, the sound of my late husband Samuel practicing his trumpet in the evenings, the constant ringing of the phone. After Samuel passed, the house grew quieter. But my children, already grown, still filled my life. They needed me, or rather, they needed things from me. David, my brilliant but perpetually unlucky son, always had a new business venture that was guaranteed to succeed if only he had a little seed money. I would give it to him, taking from the nest egg Samuel and I had so carefully built. Lena, my beautiful, ambitious daughter, married a man with expensive tastes. She needed help with a down payment on a bigger house, money for a private school for my grandson, a loan for a new car because hers was unreliable. I was their safety net, their soft place to land, their open-hearted, open-walleted mother who never said no. I loved them, and this was how I knew how to show it. I thought my sacrifices were a testament to my love. I never realized they were teaching my children that my love and my resources were infinite and unconditional, something they were entitled to. The beginning of the end came 2 years ago. I had just turned 73. My own savings were nearly gone, and I was living on my small widow's pension. It was enough for me, for my quiet life, but it was not enough to fund their increasingly expensive lifestyles. The final ask was a big one. They came to me together, a united front, just like they did when they were children trying to convince me to get them a puppy. They wanted to buy a vacation home in Florida. They had found the perfect place, they said. It was a family investment, they claimed. They just needed me to co-sign the loan and put up the last of my savings for the down payment. "It'll be for all of us, Mom," Lena had said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "A place for you to relax in the winter, a place for the grandkids." For the first time in my life, a cold, hard knot of refusal formed in my stomach. I looked at my 2 grown children, both with good jobs, beautiful homes, and a lifetime of my support behind them, asking me to leverage my last bit of security for their vacation home, and for the first time, I said the word I should have learned to say decades ago. No! The shock on their faces was immediate, followed by a dark, ugly wave of indignation. "No?" David had sputtered. "What do you mean, no? We're your children!" "And I am your mother," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Not your bank. I have given you everything I have to give. There is nothing left." That was when Lisa, my daughter, looked at me with a coldness I had never seen before. "I knew it," she hissed. "Yeah, you're just being selfish. You're sitting on all this money in this big house and you won't help your own family? What kind of mother are you?" Selfish. After everything. The word broke something inside me. The argument was terrible. They accused me of not loving them, of not trusting them, of being a bitter old woman, and they left, slamming the door, the silence they left behind now filled with a new, poisonous quality. That was the last real conversation I had with them. The phone calls became infrequent, then stopped. Invitations to family dinners ceased. My grandson's school plays, his soccer games, I was no longer told when they were happening. They didn't rage or scream. They just erased me. They cut me out of their lives with the quiet, surgical precision of an accountant closing a ledger. My refusal to be their ATM had rendered me useless to them. My role as mother was officially terminated. So now I sit here, in the quiet of my 75th birthday. I baked a small cupcake this morning using the recipe my own mother taught me. The single candle flickers, its small flame a tiny point of light in the vast, silent house. I think about my children, and I still love them. That's the most heartbreaking part of all. The love doesn't die, even when you've been forgotten. It just sits here, in your chest, a constant, aching reminder of a life that used to be. My reward for a lifetime of love is this cupcake, this candle, this silent room, and I am left with only one question, a question I asked the ghosts of the past, a question I asked the woman in the mirror. Where did I go so wrong? The days after my 75th birthday were no different from the day itself. The silence in the house grew deeper, more profound. It became a character in my life, a constant, quiet companion that sat with me at the dinner table and lay beside me in my large, empty bed. I would wake up in the morning and, for a fleeting, blissful second, I would forget. I would think, I should call Lena, see how her big presentation went, or I wonder if David needs me to pick up anything for dinner. And then memory, cruel and sharp, would rush back in and the silence would settle over me again, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I spent my days sifting through the archives of my life, a lonely historian of my own motherhood. I'd pull out old photo albums, my fingers tracing the smiling faces of my children, as babies, as toddlers, as teenagers. Where was the flaw? Where was the crack in the foundation that had led to this collapse? I remembered the sacrifices, not with pride, but with a new, agonizing scrutiny. The second mortgage I took on the house to pay for Lena's prestigious art school. The retirement funds I cashed in early to finance David's first failed startup. I saw it now not as a series of loving acts, but as a pattern of foolish enablement. I had taught them that my love meant a bottomless well of resources, that their desires were more important than my own security. I hadn't raised children. I had raised consumers of my love, and when the product ran out, so did their affection. The question of why do they hate me, slowly, painfully, began to transform into a new, even more heartbreaking one. Did they ever love me at all? Or did they just love what I could do for them? I had no answer. A month after my birthday, a moment of weakness, of desperate, foolish hope overtook me. It was my grandson's birthday. Leo, Lena's boy, he was turning 12. Surely they wouldn't deny me a call to my own grandson on his birthday. My hand trembled as I dialed Lena's number. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice clipped and impatient. "What is it, Mom?" "Lena, honey," I began, my voice small. I know we're not speaking, but it's Leo's birthday. I just wanted to wish him a happy birthday. Could I please just talk to him for a minute?" There was a cold, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard her voice, muffled, speaking to someone else in the room. "It's my mother. She wants to talk to Leo." I heard a man's voice murmur something back. Her husband. Then Lena's voice came back on the line, hard as ice. "He's busy right now, Mom. He's with his friends. It's not a good time." "But it's his birthday, Lena, just for a minute." "I said it's not a good time," she snapped. "We're having a party. Look, I have to go. Goodbye." And she hung up. He was busy. Too busy to speak to his grandmother on his birthday. The cruelty of it, the casual, dismissive finality of it, was the last nail in the coffin of my hope. That was the day I truly understood. I had not just been pushed aside. I had been erased. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. I just sat there, the dead phone in my hand, and felt the last vestiges of the mother I used to be turn to dust. That woman was gone. And in her place was just me, Martha, a 75-year-old woman alone in a silent house. The realization was terrifying. But beneath the terror, there was something else. Something small and quiet. The absence of their constant needs, their manufactured crises, their endless demands had created a vacuum. And in that vacuum, for the first time in 50 years, I could hear my own thoughts. I could feel my own long-neglected desires. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I did something just for me. I walked downtown to the public library, a place I had loved as a girl, but had had no time for as a busy mother. I walked through the quiet stacks, running my fingers along the spines of the books. The scent of old paper and ink, a comforting balm to my soul. I wasn't looking for answers, not anymore. I was just being. I sat in a comfortable armchair by a sunny window and read for hours. I read poetry, I read history, I read a silly romance novel and didn't feel guilty about it. It was a small act, a quiet rebellion, but it felt monumental. It was the first step in building a new life, a life that didn't revolve around the hope of a phone call, a life that wasn't defined by the absence of my children, but by the presence of myself. The silence in my house was still there when I got home, but for the first time it didn't feel quite so heavy. It just felt quiet, and I began to wonder what else I might fill it with. My trips to the library became my ritual, the anchor of my new, unstructured days. 3 times a week, I would walk the 6 blocks from my silent house to that quiet haven of stories. The librarians began to recognize me, offering a warm, respectful smile as I entered. They didn't know my story, didn't know the gaping wound I was nursing. To them, I was just Mrs. Miller, a dignified, elderly woman who loved to read. And in their simple professional courtesy, I found a sliver of the respect my own children had denied me. I devoured books with the hunger of a starving woman. I revisited old classics, discovered new authors. I lost myself in tales of adventure, of romance, of history. The stories of others became a balm for my own, a reminder that the world was vast and full of a million different lives, a million different heartbreaks and triumphs. My own sorrow, while still immense, began to feel less like the center of the universe and more like one sad story among many. It was in the history section that I met Eleanor. Correction, I've used Eleanor as a protagonist name recently. I will use a new, unique name, Esther. It was in the history section that I met Esther. She was a woman about my age with sharp, intelligent eyes and a wicked sense of humor. We reached for the same biography of Harriet Tubman at the same time, our hands brushing. We both apologized, then laughed. We started talking. It turned out she was a retired history professor, a widow like me. Her children lived on the other side of the country and were, as she put it with a wry smile, professionally busy. I understood the gentle euphemism. We started meeting for coffee after our library sessions. Our friendship was a slow, gentle unfurling. We talked about books, about politics, about the aches and pains of getting older. We shared stories of our late husbands, of the lives we had lived. I never told her the full, ugly truth about why my own children had abandoned me. I was too ashamed. But she seemed to understand the shape of my loneliness without needing the details. She was the first real friend I had made in years, a connection based not on shared history or family obligation, but on a simple, adult affinity. One afternoon, we were discussing a book we had both read about the Great Migration. So many stories, Esther said with a sigh. So many lives just lost to time, ordinary people with extraordinary stories that no one ever wrote down. Her words sparked something in me. I thought of my own story, of my mother's stories and my grandmother's before her, stories of resilience, of love, of struggle, stories that existed only in my own fading memory. If we don't tell them, they die with us. A voice in my head seemed to say, echoing a sentiment I once read. The idea, when it came, was small but insistent. I went to the head librarian, a young woman named Sarah. I was thinking, I began, my voice hesitant at first, then gaining strength. There are so many older people in this community, people like me who have lived through so much history, but our stories are invisible. What if we started a group, a memory project, a place where we could come and just tell our stories and maybe someone could write them down? Sarah looked at me, a new kind of respect in her eyes. Mrs. Miller, she said, that is a wonderful idea. And so the Oakwood Memory Project was born. Every Thursday afternoon, a small group of us would meet in the library's community room. At first, it was just me, Esther, and 2 other quiet ladies from the neighborhood. I would prompt them with questions, and they would begin to talk. They told stories of growing up in the Jim Crow South, of moving north for a better life, of raising families, of working in factories, of love and loss. Their stories were beautiful, painful, funny, and profound. I would sit with a tape recorder just listening, my heart full. Word began to spread. Our small group grew. People started bringing in old photographs, letters, documents. We were creating an archive, a living history of our community, a testament to the ordinary, extraordinary lives that are so often forgotten. I had found my purpose. It wasn't the grand, all-consuming purpose of motherhood that had defined my life for 50 years. It was a quieter, gentler purpose, but it was mine. I was no longer just the forgotten mother of David and Lena. I was Martha, the founder of the Oakwood Memory Project, a historian, a keeper of stories. The question of why my children hate me still surfaced sometimes in the quiet of the night, but it had lost its power. Their rejection, their cruelty was a part of my story, yes, but it was no longer the whole story. My life was becoming something more. I was weaving a new narrative for myself, one thread, one story at a time. The silence in my house was still there, but now it was filled with the echoes of other people's voices, other people's lives. And in that chorus, my own quiet voice was finally beginning to find its strength. The Oakwood Memory Project became my life's great, unexpected third act. What had started as a small, desperate attempt to fill the silence of my own life blossomed into a vital part of our community. Our weekly meetings grew. Our little archive of oral histories and photographs became a treasured local resource. We received a grant from the State Historical Society. The local newspaper did a lovely feature on us, with a picture of me and Esther smiling, surrounded by the faces of our town's past. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of pride that was entirely my own. It wasn't the reflected pride of a mother watching her children succeed. It was the quiet, solid pride of a woman who had created something meaningful herself. The question of my own children still lingered, of course, a dull, phantom ache in my heart, but it no longer defined my days. I had built a new family, a family of choice bound by shared stories and mutual respect. I had found a purpose that nourished my soul rather than draining it. I was, for the most part, at peace. And then, of course, the phone rang. It was David. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly 5 years. It was a ghost from another lifetime. "Mom?" he said, his voice hesitant, almost timid. A stark contrast to the entitled, angry man who had taken his father's saxophone from my home. "David," I replied, my voice calm, neutral. My heart did not leap. It did not ache. It simply waited. "Mom, I need you," he said, and the old familiar script began. His new guaranteed win business venture, the one he had sold his father's legacy for, had predictably failed. He had lost everything. The woman he had been with had left him. He was broke, alone, and on the verge of being evicted from his apartment. He was at rock bottom, and just as he had done his entire life, he was calling his mother to fix it. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he wept into the phone. "I was a fool, a greedy, terrible son. You were right about everything. Please, Mom, I have nowhere else to go. Can I just come home just for a little while until I get back on my feet?" The old Martha, the ghost of the mother I used to be, stirred within me. The instinct to say, "Of course, baby, come home," was a powerful primal urge, but I was not that woman anymore. I thought of the long, lonely nights I had spent after he'd left. I thought of the condescending way he and his sister had treated me. I thought of the selfish label they had thrown at me for daring to have a single boundary. And I thought of the new life I had so painstakingly built for myself, a life of peace, purpose, and quiet dignity. "No, David," I said, my voice gentle, but as firm and unyielding as the old oak tree in my backyard. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "No?" he whispered, as if he'd never heard the word before. "No," I repeated. "I love you, son. A part of me will always love you, but my home is no longer your safety net. My life is no longer the solution to your bad decisions. You are a grown man. It is time for you to learn how to get back on your own 2 feet by yourself." But I have nothing," he cried, his voice now a panicked wail. "Where will I go?" "I don't know, David," I said, and this was the hardest, most necessary truth I had ever spoken. "That is no longer my problem to solve." I told him about the local homeless shelter, the one our church supported. I told him about the job placement services at the community center. I offered him information, resources, but I did not offer him a home. I did not offer him money. I did not offer him a solution. I offered him only the dignity of facing his own consequences. He screamed at me then, the terrified, entitled child inside him lashing out in a final, furious tantrum. He called me selfish. He called me a terrible, unloving mother. He said I had never really loved him. I listened to it all, my heart aching with a sad, familiar pity. And when he was finally done, I said very quietly, "I love you enough to finally let you go, David. Goodbye." And I hung up the phone. I sat there in the quiet of my living room, the room that was now filled with books and stories and the quiet hum of my own peaceful life. And I wept. I wept for the son I had lost, for the pain he was in, for the terrible, necessary boundary I had just drawn. But these were different tears. They were not the tears of a victim. They were the tears of a mother who had finally done the hardest, most loving thing of all. She had let her child fall in the desperate hope that one day he might finally learn how to stand. My story, I realized, was not about whether my children hated me. It was about whether I had finally learned to love myself enough to survive their disappointment. And the answer, I knew with a quiet, sad, and unshakable certainty, was yes. Hanging up the phone on my own son, my weeping, desperate son, should have felt like the cruelest act of my life, and in a way, it was. The silence that followed was filled with the ghost of his pain, and the mother in me, the one I thought I had buried, ached for him. But beneath the ache, there was a new, unfamiliar feeling, a profound, quiet, and unshakable sense of peace. For the first time, I hadn't fixed his problem. I had loved him enough to let him face it himself. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that it was the right thing. Life went on, my life. The Oakwood Memory Project flourished. It became my heart, my purpose. I spent my days in the quiet, comforting dust of the library archives, listening to the stories of my neighbors, recording the histories of ordinary, extraordinary lives. I found a new family in my little group of writers, in the community that grew around our project. My house, once so silent and empty, was now filled with the warmth of new friendships, with purpose, with the quiet hum of my own contentment. I was no longer a ghost in my own life. I was its author. I didn't hear from David for a long time. I resisted the urge to ask my sister about him. His journey had to be his own, but news, as it often does in small towns, found its way to me. I heard it from a woman at my church who volunteered at the city's homeless shelter. "You know," she said one Sunday, "a man came in a few months ago, looked like he'd hit rock bottom. Your son, David, he stayed for a few weeks, but he wasn't like some of the others. He started helping out, mopping floors, serving meals. Then he got a job, a manual labor job with a construction crew, moved into a small room for rent. He's working, Martha, really working for the first time." I just nodded, my heart full of a quiet, painful pride. He was falling, yes. But he was falling forward. He was learning to stand. The final piece of the story came on a cold winter evening, nearly 2 years after my last phone call with him. A letter appeared in my mailbox with no return address. The handwriting was his. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Mom," it began, "I don't know if you'll read this. I don't deserve you to, but I had to write it. I need you to know that the day you said no to me on the phone was the day my life began. Your no was the hardest, most loving gift anyone has ever given me. It forced me to look at myself, at the pathetic, entitled man I had become, and I was disgusted. I've been working for 2 years now. Real work, hard work. I've paid off my debts. I've been going to therapy. I'm learning to be a man my father would not have been ashamed of. I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness. I know that is not mine to ask for, and I am not writing to ask for money or to come home. I am writing simply to say thank you. Thank you for loving me enough to finally stop saving me. You gave me my life back by refusing to be a part of it anymore. I hope one day I can be a son you are not ashamed of. I love you, David." I read the letter, and the tears I had held back for so long finally came, not tears of grief or anger, but tears of grace, the quiet, cleansing tears of a mother who had walked through fire and found her child safe on the other side. I folded the letter and placed it in the old family Bible next to a picture of him as a little boy. I didn't call him. It wasn't time yet. His journey was his own, and he needed to walk it a little further, and my journey was my own. But for the first time, I felt like our paths might one day, in the distant future, run parallel again, not as a dependent child and his enabling mother, but as two independent adults, bound by a difficult but enduring love. Today is my 77th birthday. The house is quiet, but it is a peaceful quiet. I will have dinner tonight not alone, but with my dear friend Esther and some other ladies from my writing group. There's a small cake on the counter, one that Esther baked for me. The phone did not ring this morning with a call from my children, but my mailbox held a single simple card. It was a picture of a sunrise. Inside, it just said, "Happy birthday, Mom. I hope the sun is shining on you today. I love you, David." And as I sit here in my quiet, sun-filled living room, I know that it is. The sun is shining. My reward for a lifetime of love wasn't the loneliness I had feared. It was the wisdom to understand what love really is. It's not just about giving. It's about knowing when to stop. And in that hard-won, painful, beautiful lesson, I had finally, truly found something for myself. Peace.